Yeah, so I'd like to say that the Wakefield Youth Justice Service are really proud to have achieved the designation of the SEND Quality Award with a Child First commendation. And today we'd like to share some of the work that we're currently rolling out, but also developing as we go along. So we're really lucky that we do have a dedicated education team, and we have Ed, who is our careers practitioner, Holly and Hilary, who are our education and intervention support workers, Lucy, who is our dedicated speech and language therapist, and myself as the ETE coordinator. But what I would like to add at this point is that we very much see ourselves as one whole team that does, work on anything to do with supporting our young people with special educational or additional needs, child first practice, and indeed child trauma. So where are we now? One of our priorities has been to further develop and work on really strong working partnerships. So just to give you some examples, we've got a priority pathway to CAMS, enhanced outreach and FCAMS. We also have really strong information sharing between SENAT, our schools, colleges, education psychology, just to name a few. And we also encourage regular meetings with our schools. So, for example, we have termly meetings with some of our specialist schools and pupil referral units. Regular contact with our colleges and indeed alternative provision providers. So looking at practice improvement, some of the initiatives that we're already working on a regular basis is our case formulations, which are held monthly, and case managers can refer young people to those formulation meetings, and we invite partners. We also have partnership audit meetings, known as PAMs, thematic audits, practice development forums for all our team that are held on a quarterly basis. And of course, we're on with continuously gathering information for the Youth Justice Board key performance indicators and working towards that, and very much utilise that data for the Youth Justice Board, but also to really help us to understand our cohort, and that information then gets fed into the annual needs analysis. So moving on, in terms of workforce development and the continuous development of our team, we very much strive to ensure that all of the team are trauma informed, responsive. We've had a variety of training delivered to us in terms of the neurodiversity. Emotionally school avoidance was a session that was delivered by our educational psychology team in the district. And as we speak, all of our team are working towards or have achieved a Child First Effective Practice Award. As I've already mentioned, it's very much a whole team approach, right from our reception team to our head of service, but everyone is very much committed to this, and indeed we are really lucky to have a dedicated ETE team to be able to drive this forward. So where are we now? We've got clear pathways and processes for information gathering to inform assessments, plans and interventions. All assessments, plans and interventions consider special educational needs, additional learning needs at the earliest opportunity. So we're on with it straight away. As soon as we get a child allocated, we are gathering that information from education systems, but also, we contact schools verbally so we can get that real input on each child. I organise monthly ETE consultations with the case managers where we discuss every child on the caseload. As I've said before, we've developed excellent working relationships with partners across the district. We have the case formulation model in place, up and running, and Rasheen will talk to you about that later. In addition, we have got a dedicated speech and language therapist, and we offer every single child that comes through our service a speech and language assessment. And then this leads into also offering a communication passport, and Lucy's going to speak to you about that next. We very much are committed to address the NEAT figure collaboratively across the district. We've got NEAT task and finish groups. We have a very clear NEAT strategy in the district. And I'll give you one example that recently we put together a bespoke employability programme for our young people that we worked on and delivered together with West Yorkshire Fire Service. So we indeed have a very proactive and committed education lead on our partnership board, and that member of the board also offers consultations. You know, if we've got any difficult cases that we're really a little bit stuck on, we can get hold of that board member at any time for that extra little bit of advice and guidance and their view on things. We also have an escalation route and consultation offers by partners. So that includes the partnership board member that I've just mentioned, our education lead, education psychology, YSENS. We're also in touch with team managers on the Senate team, to name a few. In February 2025, we were very pleased to achieve the West Yorkshire ATR Trauma Informed Charter member status. And last but not least, we have a comprehensive annual needs analysis across all of the work that is in development to inform and indeed improve our practice. So if we can move on now to Lucy, who was going to tell us about the role of the speech and language therapist.
Hello everybody, so I'm Lucy. I'm a speech and language therapist and I've worked at the Youth Justice Service for around 15 years now. So I'm really fortunate to be in this position where I'm able to really target those children that are hard to reach. So as part of our offer, every young person is offered a speech and language therapy assessment, and it kind of goes along the lines of they are referred into us as standard practice rather than the ones that are specifically picked out. So most children will have an assessment, and only if there are absolutely nothing identified in terms of any difficulties will they not have an assessment. So the idea is that we're trying to move towards every young person having a communication passport. Holly will speak to you and show you an example of that later. And it's been a really useful tool that we've kind of introduced into the service since September 2024. So the reason behind this was to try and make sure that the voice of the child was recognised. So whilst I was doing my reports, I was able to identify what the speech and language difficulties were and what support and advice needs to be put in place in order to support that young person. But often the way that the reports are written, the language can often be complex and the young people don't always understand what their needs are. So thinking about how we could develop that in terms of the voice of the child, I actually thought that the communication passport would be a really good way for them to record how they felt they communicated best, what strategies would be useful for them. And it also covers not only their direct communication, but also things about their environment, if they prefer to be in a class with lots of children, whether they prefer a quiet space, what their triggers are, what their sensory triggers are, and the feedback that we've got from these has been really, really positive. It's helped integrate some children into school and really got them to start to attend again. So My role also is to work with case managers and other specialist services in the team. The idea is that all the communication difficulties are recognised. So what I know from being a speech and language therapist for many, many years now is that often the children who are referred to me have got a diagnosis of SEMH, that's their prime need, and often there are communication difficulties which run alongside that. And the communication difficulties are often the cause of the behaviour issues. So it's about really honing down to find out what is causing the behaviour and looking at how we can address that to make sure that the behaviours don't escalate. So that is really, really important. And I think we're trying to get that out to schools and about how they manage these young people and try and keep them in school better and for longer. So we also make sure that everyone who's working in the Youth Justice Service has got a good understanding of speech and language needs. And I think since I've been here, the skills of the case managers has really improved in not only identifying, but actually working with the young people. They understand and recognise the terminology, and they're able to adapt their working materials to a level that's appropriate to the child. So the communication passport, as I've said, was developed back in September. The idea behind it is that the children can take ownership of that document and relate to it. So it becomes their own document that they can keep, they have a copy of, and that schools have a copy of, and they can really understand what's going on. So Holly is going to speak to you about how she delivers the passport. Sorry, Marius.
No, this is great.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I thought you were just saying something. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Writing things down.
I'm sorry. So Holly will speak to you now about what she does with the communication passports.
So I'll just flick to the communication passport that we will be talking through. So if I pull out this. So this is a communication passport that we've done with one of our young people. The first page, this front cover, can be adapted based on age and interest, because some do feel like this is a bit too childlike. So we do adapt the front page based on that particular young person. So this first page, it'll be emergency contact information. This is really good because communication passports are versatile, so they can be used amongst other professionals. And this is really good for if they're out and about in the community. They've got emergency details at hand, so that young person then feels safe because they know who the professional will ring. This is about how young people understand what people are talking to them about. So with this, there are prompt questions that help us, but a lot of the time we can just ask them the question, do you struggle to understand what people are talking to you about? And they'll tell us how they struggle to understand information and what is being said. Some young people do struggle to understand that question, so there are prompts such as, do you need extra time to think about what I've said? Do you struggle with long, hard sentences? And they'll tell us what they struggle with when someone is speaking to them. So this page is about how people talk to them. So this young person here said she doesn't like people shouting, so she would prefer it if somebody spoke to her in like a softer tone. Again, we will just ask, what do people do wrong when they're talking to you? But then there are prompts if the young person struggles with that. So do loud voices stress you out? Do you have trouble hearing? Is it hard when people give you lots of information? So like this young person said, it's hard if you give her lots of information and she'll switch off. So this page is how they feel when people talk, when they're talking to others. So how they get the words across and how they communicate. So a question to start that off would be, when you're talking to people, do you find it hard to explain what you mean? This part's really good because it'll talk about distractions, what they do when they're distracted, how long they can listen to. So it might come across as that they're being rude when actually they can only listen for, like this young person said, 2 minutes before a mind will start wandering. And then it also covers how they process a sentence. So this young person said if a sentence has been going on for too long, she'll forget what's being said, but she wouldn't have the confidence to ask them to repeat it. So a professional speaking to this young person would have to keep that in mind. This is how they talk to others as well and how they present themselves. So this last question, like, would you describe yourself as a confident person? How do you feel talking in front of people? And how do you feel talking to strangers? That says, and then it'll say, like, how will they display when they're uncomfortable? So this young person said when she's uncomfortable, she laughs. And that's not her being rude. She laughs when she's nervous. So previously, this young person's been mistaken for being rude, and she's been in trouble for that, when actually that's just how she masks that she's uncomfortable. So it's really useful to get that on paper for a professional to have in front of them. And then this is the sensory profile. So what I'll do with this is just ask them to describe their ideal classroom. And this helps the young person just to reel off what they're like, how they'll learn better, what an environment would be useful for them. This again can be adapted to that young person. So if they're not in school, you wouldn't say classroom, you could say something where they are often, or in a place where they do find it overwhelming. So I would just ask them to describe their ideal classroom, but again, there are questions that prompt them. So do you feel better working on your own? Do you like working with people around you? Do you like it dark, light, if there's background noise? So that just gives them a chance to say their ideal place. And then on this page, there's likes and dislikes. It's useful to have this on because it can be used as a de-escalation technique and a calming technique. So if this child does feel overwhelmed and overstimulated, there are things that they like, so we can use that to kind of make them feel at ease. And then again, if it's saying what they don't like, try and avoid that when working with this young person. And this is the last page. So this is often like dysregulated behaviour that you'll see. So if you're talking about a classroom, often there'll be situations where they feel bored or frustrated. So here it'll show them how they deal with that emotion. So this young person said if she's bored or if she's in a bad mood, she'll start an argument. If she's in a good mood, she'll play with a chair. So it's showing that these behaviours are actually because of a certain environment that they're in. And then in the bottom box, it'll say different environments or different situations and how that would make that young person feel. And that is it.
Fantastic.
Hello, I'm Roisin Farmer, one of the team managers in Wakefield Youth Justice Service, and I chair the formulations in our service. And just to give a bit of an overview of the practical arrangements before we get into the detail of the purpose of the formulation and what support that entails for children and families, I'll just quickly explain the practical arrangements. So we have formulation panels on a monthly basis, and the referrals in to formulation is where the practitioner assesses that child there's a high judgment in terms of safety concerns for the child. So the key sort of principle of our formulation model is that it's very much a partnership approach to coming to understand the child and family and to agree on some actions to take away to help move things on. So that's a brief overview on the practical arrangements. So if we move to thinking about some of the more theoretical, I suppose, underpinnings of the implementation of formulation into our practice, well, we very much see that our formulation model is aligned with trauma-informed and child-first principles. And as Tracy noted earlier, we achieved the chartership status with the West Yorkshire Adversity, Trauma and Resilience Network, which is a piece of ongoing work that we've been involved in since the beginning of 2024. And also just to mention, in terms of the alignment with the Child First principle, it's very much, if we think of the first tenet in the Child First principle is that, we see children as children, and that is about prioritising the best interests of children, recognising their needs, capacities, rights and their potential. We see that all work is child-focused, developmentally informed, and acknowledges the structural barriers and also meets the responsibilities towards our children. We see the formulation model as a really useful way for professionals to understand the needs and experiences of children and their families. It's a valuable model in assisting professionals to think about all of the different parts of the child's life, past and present. And we put all these pieces together like a jigsaw. So essentially, we're taking a picture, a snapshot of that child, which tells us their story. So formulating the discussion in a systematic way, and in Wakefield we use the 5P model, and you'll see what this entails when we screen share a completed anonymised example of one of our formulations. And the 5Ps is essentially about the presenting, perpetuating, predisposing, precipitating and protective factors in that child's life. And in this way it helps us professionals to develop a hypothesis of how a child comes to present with certain difficulties. And utilising this approach, we can at least avoid or minimise the guesswork, assumption and bias. So in this way, it can be used to shape our practice in a trauma-informed way and inform our interventions with children working with our service. The model really helps us to understand a child and shape our inquiries. So we're moving the question from what have you done wrong or what's wrong with you to a more trauma-informed and child-first inquiry, which is what has happened to you. Just moving on to the next slide. So we're just looking here at the more practical arrangements in terms of our model of formulation in Wakefield. So we hope that our formulation work promotes a shared understanding of the child and family amongst the professionals involved. It also promotes more effective partnership working. It can lead to more relevant support for the child and family, also leading to referrals and access to specialist services for the child and family. And we also are always keen to, encourage creative thinking when it comes to some of the solutions to helping the child and family move on. We're also keen to identify and avoid anything that may re-traumatise the child and family. And lastly, our formulation model contributes to progressing the ambition to becoming trauma-informed across all sectors and services. And as said previously, we join colleagues in that aspiration to become trauma-reformed and responsive by 2030. As Tracy referenced earlier, the data that we capture and utilise within the service across a variety of activity, when it comes to formulations, we're really keen to understand the cohort of children who we chair formulations for, and collating and monitoring the data from those children and their formulations is really being used to help us shape practice within and outside the service with our partners. And lastly, I'd like to end with a bit of a headline before we go on to look at the completed anonymised formulation template, in that we're reminded that children and families do have inherent strengths, and we are always prioritising within our formulation model that primarily it's a strength-based approach, and we must always at every opportunity seek to understand what those strengths are and to support the child and family to build on those. So I'm just going to move on now to share with you a completed anonymised formulation template. Okay, I won't go into too much detail here, Marius.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, just give a broad brushstroke over the formulation model. That'd be lovely.
Of course. Okay, so here we have a completed anonymised formulation template that we've recently undertaken for one of the girls on our cohort. And I think important to sort of share the reason why the L was referred in for a formulation. As I referenced earlier, L was assessed with high safety concerns to L, and that's in sort of the newer language across HMIP and YJB in terms of, previously we spoke about risk of serious harm to others and safety and vulnerability to the child. In the new language, we think about safety concerns for the child, and what brings a child into formulation is where they've been assessed, where the concerns have been assessed as high. So we had the formulation very recently, and one of the main challenges here for Elle and the family was around education. So one of the sort of practical things to point out is when we begin the formulation discussion, we very much focus on the presenting risky behaviour. So what we remind professionals in attendance at the meeting is that this is very much about, in terms of timescales, no longer than, outside a 6-month window. So we're thinking about presenting risky behaviour within the last 6 months, and primarily we're thinking about systems contact with Youth Justice Service, any ASB, any intelligence that we've had shared, any sort of previous offending or current intelligence that the police may have shared with us. So this box, the presenting risky behaviour box, is where we will start the discussion. And the model that we have in Wakefield is that we will work our way around the template starting in the presenting risky behaviour box, but we engage professionals at the meeting to share the information that they bring along. Either that's from a social care perspective, so we may have the child's social worker, if there is no current social care involvement, our senior social worker, who's one of the attendees at formulation, will have done a system check prior to the meeting and will share in this box the family social care history, if there is one, or the early help history. What we'll also hear from our health colleagues, and similarly they will have undertaken a system check, and we also have information from the child assessment in terms of their health. So this box, in terms of the predisposing risk factors, if we think of some of the more inherent or earlier experiences that the child and family have been through, this is what you would expect to see in here in the predisposing risk factors. And we're also it's also important to ensure that we're thinking about this family as a unit. So we would expect to see information about siblings or any other children or adults who are involved with the child and provide care for the child. As I pointed out in the other slide, we are very much focused on understanding the strengths inherent with the child and family, and we are always keen to have this box heavily populated, if you like. So lots of really good protective factors or scaffolding, if you like, in terms of what's currently supporting that child and family. And I won't go through the examples that you can see on screen, but broadly that's what we are sort of working towards identifying in this box. So if we move up here to the precipitating risk factors, this is very much in the here and now. What is going on whenever that child either, gets involved in behaviour that we wouldn't want them to get involved in, or whether it's what we know has led to them becoming involved in offending behaviour. It may be problematic behaviour in school. Often this is about, what we come to understand about the child's day-to-day, psychological well-being, how they're operating. Is their threat system switched on? Is there, are they sort of seeking reassurance from others? Is there, some care seeking going on, or are they, hyper vigilant, that sort of thing? If we move over to the left here, we can see what we call things that perpetuate the risk, or how we'd explain that to the child. We talk about, what kind of things keep this behaviour going, and some of that can be about, friends and peers. It can be about, some things that are going on in the family. It can be around some vulnerability of the parents, and in turn, how that impacts on their ability to parent and to safeguard their child. When we conclude the meeting, what our aim is to come away with a list of actions for the professional network involved with that child and family. And as Tracy referenced earlier in the presentation, these meetings have been really, fundamental in moving some quite stuck issues on, in terms of common issues that we see for children, particularly in education in the service. And this is why, understanding the cohort of children who are discussed in formulation, and some of their earlier experiences, the structural issues impacting on these children, why it's really important for us then to capture that data and to use it to really understand the cohort. Thank you.
So a communication passport, a fantastic example of something I think that comes out of youth justice that could influence how schools support young people with low literacy. How's it going in engaging with schools on this whole aspect of a communication passport?
Currently, Maris, we're at the stage where we've been introducing it to schools on an individual basis as we put together a communication passport for a child. We also do have termly meetings with certain schools. So in those meetings, we've discussed it, with all the staff that are present, we've discussed it there. But at this time, it has just been on an individual basis. But we do every so often get invited to the forum for the designated safeguarding lead. So yes. I could see that would be a good arena, to share with all the schools that, this is something that we work on with each child.
Well, I think it is vital. At Microlink, we're trying to get the entire system to look at what we call transition accessibility passports. In other words, what are the issues around a young person to help them in transition, either into 16 plus or even into the world of work, or supported internships. Something like the structure of a communication passport works for so many young people.
Yeah, and it's I know that Lucy does have plans as well to get in a newsletter that does go out to all the schools in the district, and I'm sure we will get calls about it to find out more.
No, that's wonderful. The other factor is which I think is so important, is this whole thing about how young people learn perhaps to protect self from low literacy and not understanding. And there's examples, aren't there, of young people smiling at a magistrate when they're being sentenced, or in that formal environment, only because it's their chosen way of masking. I love this idea of actually having that specifically within the communication passport. When a young person feels comfortable, when a young person shows their understanding. Yeah, could you just illuminate something a bit more about that side of it? Because I think that's a vital part of the communication passport.
Yeah, sorry, Maris, can you say that again? What do
Yeah.
you want me to illuminate on?
Okay, I'll say that again.
Yeah.
Within the communication passport, there's a lovely little section about how a young person feels, how a young person actually sometimes behaves when they are feeling compromised or feeling down. That's wonderful, because there's examples, aren't there, of some young people smiling at a magistrate in court when it's doing a really serious bit, when that's actually a protective mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can give you a really good example, Marius, where recently we facilitated a meeting with a school and family and the child in terms of a reintegration meeting, where this child did often, have fits of giggles, and that was a nervous reaction. And when she felt a little bit uncomfortable, so we were able to talk that through with the school before, and it made a massive difference to that meeting compared to one previously held, where they had thought that she was being disrespectful. And when they had that understanding of that child's behaviour, it really helped in the meeting. And I have to say, the school handled it marvellously. And it was just them having that understanding up front, really, that she potentially may react in that way. And so they handled it in a much more, child-friendly and understanding way, really.
Absolutely. Tracy, colleagues from Wakefield, thank you sincerely.